Good afternoon. My name is Susan Doyle and I will be your facilitator today on behalf of Lean Construction Ireland. I would like to welcome you to Lean Construction Ireland's 35th webinar, the topic of which is the persuasive power of the last planner system metrics by Maria Ryan from Crystalline Solutions. If you have a question, please type it in the question box and we will consolidate and ask Maria in the second half of the webinar. If there are any questions that we don't get answered during the webinar, we will follow up by email afterwards. The speaker for today is Maria Ryan from Crystalline Solutions. Maria is the Managing Director of Crystalline Solutions. She started her career as an engineer and with both an MBA and Black Belt has nearly 30 years experience. She has deployed Lean across a variety of sectors, including construction, pharmaceutical, aerospace, healthcare, medical devices, and general engineering. She has a genuine understanding of the patience and perseverance required to build sustainable change and deliver business results. From a construction perspective, Maria is a passionate advocate of the quality and productivity benefits of Lean in the construction sector. In conjunction with her team, she has provided support at LCI events, including facilitating last planner system workshops at the Southwest Lean Forum and WIT, presented on cultural change management, and was project leader for 2 LCI strategic project teams, including the developing of the Lean Pass program, which was launched at the LCI conference in October 2019. Maria has supported construction clients at both strategical and tactical levels, including 5S, direct observation, problem solving, supplier early engagement, and the last planner system. Maria and her team have trained and mentored the last planner system on project sizes ranging from 2 to 500 million euro within data centres, clean room, pharma, fit out and housing. The CLS team have supported clients, main contractors and subcontractors within Ireland, UK and Europe. From research around the benefits of the LPS on projects, Maria has co-authored 2 publications on the impact of the last planner system and presented findings at the IGLC conference in 2019, and she's very much looking forward to presenting at the LCI webinar today. I will now pass you over to Maria to start her presentation.
Great stuff. Thanks very much, Susan, for the introduction and for the invitation to present today. And I suppose just before we kind of kick off into the presentation itself, really, I suppose Lean is very much looking at developing or delivering value to customers. So that's really the focus of the last planner system itself, is why are we actually using it? Is very much trying to support our projects to deliver the client requirements. So within Lean, there are 5 Lean principles. So one is looking at the customer value, and then one of the 5 is also around continuous improvement. And that's really, I suppose, the context of today's presentation is focusing in around about the continuous improvement phase of the last planner system. What are the metrics within that, and what do we do when we actually have the metrics? What do we actually do with the information? So what I'm going to do is actually start with an example that's outside of a construction project, and it's really, I suppose, kind of introducing the concepts within the last planner system. So if you were to kind of think about maybe last year, if you were involved in leading the International Irish Rugby team, and you were looking essentially at maybe the first match. So in your first match of the Six Nations, let's just say you're playing Scotland. So within the match itself, I suppose, what we're really looking at here I just want to check, Susan, can you still hear me?
Yeah, absolutely, Maria, go ahead.
Yeah, no problem. Sorry, I thought I lost you there. So really what we're looking at here is that if you're looking at the Six Nation match, and it's the first match of the season, and it's Ireland versus Scotland. So within the match itself, which is the kind of the execution part of the project, we're very much looking at essentially what is the score from the actual match itself. So when the match is being played, one of the key aspects of it is to actually know what is the score itself. Are we winning or losing? So that's kind of the first part of it. Then to be able to put your 15 people on the actual pitch in the first place, there's a planning element to it. So if I was to ask you to have a think about, okay, what are actually the inputs required to be able to actually deliver a good score to win the match itself? So areas you might consider, for example, is first of all is what actually is the overall goal. So you'd like to be able to very much win on the Six Nations itself. You're going to have a look then at your milestones. So you've got 6 matches to play. When are they going to be played as your key milestones? And then to deliver each one of those matches, there's going to be a coaching element to it. There's training, fitness level, and actually developing a game plan. So that's very much the inputs into the day to see if you're actually winning or losing. And when you finish the match then itself, it's not a case of hopefully everyone goes out and celebrates if it's a positive win. However, when you come back the following week, it's not just a case of accepting this score and going, yeah, we did really, really good. The next part of it is that the team will sit down and very much have a look at the metrics. So how do we actually perform? So even if we actually won in the particular week, we're going to look at things like the scrums. How do we perform in our set pieces? How do we get on our scrums, our lineouts? What was our discipline like? And even within the match itself, you know, were there penalties being given away? What was actually our kicking percentage success rate? We then take that information and then what are we going to do with it? So it's one thing then to have the data and have the next level of detail. So what we're going to do is take that information and then actually use it to actually help the inputs on the planning side here. So it's really just to use this as a context that from a construction project perspective, you know, on the weekly basis and we're looking on a daily basis, are we winning or losing? So that's very much kind of the centerpiece here in terms of the execution. To be able to actually deliver a score to win or to lose, there's the planning phase, which is on the left-hand side. So you do your planning to help you execute on the day itself. And the last part there is very much looking at the continuous improvement. So again, you're taking the information, the data, and you want to actually do something with it to continuously improve and help in terms of performance. So aligning that then to the last planner system, we have, again, those, I suppose, at a high level, because there's 6 phases within it. And we're just going to do a little bit of a brief recap just for people that might be familiar with the system here. So what you have here is in the 6 phases themselves, the first 4 phases are different levels of planning. So you start with your milestone plan and literally what are the key milestones within the milestone plan. Then you look for, say, one particular milestone and you start looking at the pull plan and really looking to understand what are those kind of key handoffs and can we still actually deliver that particular milestone. Then we're moving on to more and more detail. We're starting to look ahead. So for example, as a guideline, you might look at 6 weeks ahead. For some projects, it might be a slightly shorter time frame, but as a guideline, you're looking at the 6-week look ahead. And you're trying to understand, can we actually have work ready to go in to the final detailed plan on the weekly work plan? What are the constraints? How can we remove those constraints early in the process so that in the next 6 weeks' time, when we have the detailed plan, which is our weekly work plan, which is the WWP, we're now saying, okay, for the work that can actually flow, that there aren't constraints associated with it, they're now in the actual weekly work plan itself. So that's very much 4 parts of it is the planning stage. Then you actually have the plan. So each day you're going to go into your daily huddle and you're going to, if there's 10 tasks assigned for today, you're literally looking at, this is almost like the match on the day. Are we winning or are we losing? So, and then following from that, you're going to get information around how we're performing. And that's very much the continuous improvement side of the process here. And I suppose within the continuous improvement, there's really, I suppose, 2 parts in terms of where the continuous improvement activity can happen. So the first part is within the execution phase. So assuming we have a very good plan, what is it that we can learn that if we would say, for example, if we didn't have a good week, what can we do to actually make improvements in executing the plan? Sometimes it could also be that the areas to improve is actually on the planning side. So again, these are kind of the 2 focus areas that as part of your continuous improvement, we're either trying to improve the planning phase or we're trying to improve the execution phase. And again, the key here is that you're looking very much at the metrics. And I suppose this quote is quite good in the sense that, you can do a lot of activity in the earlier areas, but we're really looking for a measurement to be able to help us as part of this continuous improvement journey. Okay, so that was really just to kind of give you an idea of a very high level overview of the last planner system itself. And again, our focus is very much around the continuous improvement. And I suppose going back then to, from a lean perspective, the first principle of lean is value to the customer. So why are we doing this? So we're very much trying to use this process to be able to help with essentially around complying as much as we can to actually deliver the project to the schedule itself. So again, the focus for today then is looking at the continuous improvement part of the last planner system itself. And again, the focus is very much around that you're going to use the metrics to be able to almost like be a signpost on what we can do, what changes we can make to be able to deliver more value, both to the client and then obviously help our own businesses as well. So before we move on then, what I'd like to do is maybe ask you, if you've used the last planner system or if you've come across it, these kind of 3 questions. So the first question is, for anyone that has used it, what would you say the last planner system metrics are? And then as you have a think about those, what is actually each one showing you? What is it actually telling you in terms of the metrics themselves? And then I suppose the third question then is, what do you actually do when you do have the data? What do you actually do with it? And that's really what we're going to cover in more detail here. And what we're going to use is what we're calling kind of this continuous improvement funnel. So again, very similar back to like our rugby match. You have the performance of the week or performance of the day in that case, which is going to be looking at our percent plan complete. As we start looking at more and more metrics, we learn more and more as to what exactly is contributing to it. So as we drill down, we have the output, or what we call a lagging metric, which is your PPC, which is very much the performance. And as we work down through this funnel, we're looking to see, okay, well, if there has been a gap, what are the reasons for it? And ultimately, how can we prevent them? So that's really the focus on it. How can we continuously improve all the time? And then how can we actually put preventative actions in? So the presentation itself here is going to walk down essentially through those 5 steps. So when we start with the percentage plan complete, so really that's your first metric in terms of, are we winning or are we losing? And we're going to talk a little bit there just to kind of explain it with a very simple example in a moment. So the PPC is very much the measure that coming out of your weekly work plan, and in particular looking at your daily huddle, how we're performing against the plan. So we had a number of tasks planned. Did we actually achieve the target that we set out to achieve? So that's really what we're doing. So at a very high level, the PPC is really a measure of what we've executed versus what we've planned. Is there a gap between the two? And if there is, then what's the next step? What can we actually do about it? Okay, so with that in mind, one of the things I suppose we find in working with clients and to get a good quality PPC, what we're finding is that the quality of the information that's put into the weekly work plan is very important. So again, you may find yourself ended up maybe following the wrong particular root cause or maybe the wrong problem. So what I have here, I suppose, is 2 examples. One is an example of what a good assignment will look like. And then the second one then might show some of the gaps that we might come across over time. So the first one here is very much looking at, so what we'd like in the description part of it is the location of the assignment itself. So, explaining where to actually find where the activity is going to happen. The second of all is we'd like to have a very specific assignment, so quite a clear definition as to what you're actually going to do. And then the third part, which sometimes is missing, and it's highly recommended to really get the value out of using this particular part of the process, is what actually is the target for the week. So again, when you're looking at your daily huddle, you're looking all the time to see, am I actually going to achieve this target throughout the week? So that's really why it's kind of important to have that in there. So in terms of a quality assignment, you're looking at essentially the location, the quality of the assignment. What's probably not in here is just the sequencing as well. So you'd actually have the right sequence that we're following through in an appropriate sequence, and the target. What sometimes we might see as we go along is you might, for example, miss the location. So maybe the risk around that, for example, is if you've, 2 different companies are working in an area, so it might inadvertently end up that somebody's working at high level, somebody's working at a low level, which is not what we necessarily want. So in this example here, you can see there's a little bit of a gap as to where we're going to do the work, and we actually don't have a target. So these are the things that we're kind of looking for, that when you're actually putting your weekly work plan together, that you've got good quality information going into the weekly work plan. In this case, it's just missing an explanation, so it's not quite clear with the particular task. So again, you might look to try and improve what exactly is actually happening compared to this one up here. Okay, so they're really just examples, and I suppose again the PPC is very much dependent on, if we don't have a target, then what actually is the miss against. So again, it'd be an important key point from here. Moving from that then is your daily huddle. So again, for anyone that may not be familiar with it, you're literally looking at each day. So if we were kind of reflecting on yesterday, we would be saying here, okay, we've got Monday and Tuesday, we're on target to meet our 150 meters squared of coving for the week. And on Tuesday, we've some miss on it. So there's a red in there. So again, you're using then this to kind of say, okay, are we winning or losing? And the color coding can be very useful to help with that again. In terms of the PPC itself as well, it's good, I suppose, to kind of reflect on what exactly is the calculation itself. So what we're looking at here is very much that when you go to actually do the calculation, that if you reflect, say, on, for example, last week's performance, we're looking at, first of all, how many of the activities or assignments were completed versus the number of tasks that were scheduled. So what you're looking at here is kind of very much a reflection on how good we were against the plan. So that's kind of a key understanding of what the PPC is telling us. From the research side of it, then the benchmark is very much looking at 85%. And I suppose what can be different in terms of thinking here is that we're trying to get 85%. And then as an organization kind of matures in using this, you may actually, and I know it's unusual to say, but as you continuously improve towards the 85%, you might then be looking to try and almost push the schedule a little bit more. So your following weeks may be lower PPCs so that you're continuously improving to get back up to that 85%. So that's just, I suppose, a little subtlety around using the PPC itself. This is just a very simple example, just to kind of say, you know, in terms of the number of tasks planned versus the ones that weren't complete. So in a very simple way, we're basically saying to calculate PPC, it's the number of tasks that were scheduled in the week minus the ones that weren't completed or weren't completed on time or were too late, and then convert it into a percentage. So just in terms of a very simple example for yourselves to have a go at, just here, you've got a very simple example. So let's just say if you had 30 tasks planned last week and 10 of them weren't completed per the plan, what would be your PPC value? So in that example there, you'll be seeing a PPC value of 66%. So that's basically your PPC calculation itself. Next, we want to do is have a look at from a trending perspective. So you might have a PPC for 1 week, but really where the value in this is that over the life of a project, if you can start looking at the trends, that's really where you kind of start to get the value itself. So in this case here, you'll have a look at the data and you'll see a slight trending down from, say, the 80% down to somewhere around about the 75%. So again, I suppose similar to the match analogy at the start, this kind of just tells you if you're winning or losing, but what else can it actually tell you? So I suppose on its own, it just tells you the output, what we call this lagging metric of how we're getting on week. And what we need to do is actually go a little bit deeper to understand what actually is happening below the surface. So one of the areas you can have a look at, for example, here is you might look at, you know, details around in a given week, for example, you know, what percentage maybe did we finish early? Did we have a late finish? And what were the fundamental misses that we just didn't get done in the week? So it's just giving you an idea of what were some of the reasons potentially for your PPC not actually to be closer to the benchmark level. But really where we want to go to really be able to essentially move into that preventative action position is we start wanting to look at what we call the categories of variance. And this is really, I suppose, starting to create the picture as to, well, what exactly is happening. We know our PPC levels, so we know if we're winning or losing, and we really want to be able to do something with that information. So within the last planner system, there are essentially 14 categories of variance. And these, I think, pretty much cover most of the, I suppose, the variances that you'd come across. For your individual sites and projects, feel free to maybe reword them slightly for your projects. There might be something specific to your own particular sector that may not be in here, but I think it pretty much covers, I think, most of the items that you come across. So anything from maybe during the week itself, there might be a change in the scope of work. I know we're one client at the moment which is experiencing an awful lot of client-driven changes within the week, so it's really causing the planning side quite a lot of difficulties to be able to drive a good PPC and going back into those early planning aspects of it. Sometimes it might be waiting for RFIs that ideally with the weekly work plan, we're looking for any work that's planned for the week but not to have constraints. So if something is either got in with a constraint, you might like to understand the reason behind that, or alternatively, you might like to see, is there something new after happening within the week? And again, we want to understand the reasons behind that. Some of it could be around just the schedule coordination. Again, looking at prerequisite work, was there something either for ourselves that was missed or maybe by others? So on the right-hand side, you can see the other 7 there. So a combination of maybe site conditions weren't right, the weather you hadn't predicted, maybe equipment that was expected to arrive didn't arrive on time, same with the materials and same with your staff availability. So it gives you kind of a cross-section of the reasons, and that's really what we're trying to drill into here. So now that we have the PPC, we're now getting closer to be able to understand, well, what were actually the reasons that caused us to have either a very good PPC or equally a gap in the PPC value. So here I've just put up, really, it was just to kind of supposed to highlight the benefits of graphical tools. So what we would find, I suppose, sometimes when we're working with clients, we might find ourselves where we've got a lot of information. And I suppose it's really how you communicate that. So if I was to ask you, I suppose, what is this message, say with these words, what is this message actually telling us? And then if I was to show you this picture, then clearly you'd probably, hopefully know much quicker on the right-hand side using a visual versus maybe using text and so on. So what we want to do is with the categories of variance, essentially what we're trying to do here is show them using what we call the Pareto chart. So essentially with this, we're looking for what are the reasons. So over, for example, that trend that you'd have seen on the previous slide, we're looking at what are the reasons for the variance. As you can appreciate, this would change from project to project. So this is just an example from a project last year. And what you're really doing here is that, you know, on site, obviously, the speed that everybody is going at, it's difficult that if you've got 100 things coming at you from a categories of variance, what you want to do, I suppose, is use this chart to be able to identify, okay, what areas would I actually go after? So if I want to spend some time taking time out to understand root causes, where will I actually spend my time? So in this example here, you can see that the largest block there is around the schedule and coordination. So within that, then you'll be looking at potentially looking at maybe prerequisite work others, and then prerequisite work self, and maybe incorrect time estimates. So of these 14 categories, there may be 3 or 4 that you're going to try and move forward in terms of actually doing a root cause analysis. Okay, so that's really, so this is a very, very powerful tool just in terms of being able to help prioritize the work to actually focus on from a continuous improvement perspective. Moving then along. Once you now know, I'm just going to go back to the previous slide. Now that you can see where the trends are, what's really important then is the next level of information. So what we find is sometimes it's how the comments are written beside it. So what's really, really useful is to have good kind of quality comments to the right-hand side here, so that you have your category, you have the assignment description, but what actually was the comment here? So again, you can get so far in terms of your continuous improvement journey here, but really what we're looking at is the wealth of knowledge is in those comments. So these comments will really help us to go towards what are we actually going to improve? Is there a trend across the schedule and coordination, or is it actually 35 different reasons? And the comments are really, really helpful when doing this. So if you are using the last planner system and you plan to actually bring on board the continuous improvement part, if you can encourage people to document good comments in there, they can be a lot of help to be able to help with the root cause analysis. So here's an example that we would have come across in terms of some of the comments. So in terms of the comments there, it's probably challenging to do a lot with it. Some of them are blank, so you kind of end up either having to go back to maybe the crew that was on, go back to the foreman. It was a week ago, so they may not even remember what it is. So what we're looking for here, I suppose, is in terms of the quality of the comments, this would be much more useful comments, as you can see here on the right-hand side. So it gives you a little bit more depth in terms of what you can actually do with the information. So now that you can understand, so I've taken out other examples, they're not all schedule coordination in this one. So I took out, say, for example, one correct time estimate, maybe schedule and coordination, two examples of maybe schedule around the prerequisite work of others. So for example, there might be scaffolding left behind to allow for a time for a walk down, but it might actually be in the way to do this particular activity. So there might have been a delay, for example, on the activity. So what we want to do then is understand, okay, what was the reason, why did that end up here at this time in this weekly work plan? So really that's the learning that we want to get to. So again, I suppose just to summarize what we've covered so far, you're looking at, for your PPC, you're looking at a good quality assignment with a target. So when you go to measure your PPC, then you actually know, are we winning, are we losing? Once you know your PPC value, you're next moving to categories of variance. And that's now giving you, I suppose, direction of the 14 areas that there could be an issue. Where do we actually focus our attention? And then the comments then here are really the little gems that give you the opportunity to be able to go after them and go, right, what can we do about them? Is there a trend within the comments? Okay. So now we're starting to work down this funnel. So we had a look at our PPC, we've had a look at our categories of variance. Now we want to start looking at kind of, I suppose, the root cause analysis. So really that's the next part of this journey here. What are the causes? And really what we want to do is build this whole continuous improvement program on preventative actions. So to get to the preventative actions, we'd like to understand what are actually the causes of the problem that we're going to go after. So again, you're going to take some time out. So I just put out just one example here in terms of using what's called the 5 why analysis. So there's different tools that you can use. Sometimes you may even use direct observation, for example. So instead of maybe going down this route, you might go out on site and actually observe the steps to understand that. So let's just say maybe it's a time estimate. You pull that out as a trend. So then it would trigger you to use maybe another lean tool to go out and actually have a look, understand the process and understand where the sources of waste are, to be able to either see, is the target valid or is it actually the productivity? What can we find? What are the wastes in there that we can improve? So in this example here, I've just pulled out as an example. And again, while it's called the 5 why analysis, sometimes you go to the why that makes sense. So you don't just keep going for the sake of the 5 whys. It's very much looking at how far do we go before we think we're at what we call the root cause. Now, I know the term root cause is used. So again, it might be worth having a think, what exactly is a root cause versus a contributing cause? So what we're looking at here is really trying to get past that first level and actually really get down into what in the process has failed to cause this problem that we can make an improvement on. So it's very much you're going towards systemic thinking, so going beyond the first level and really getting down to the root cause. So I'll just use an example here. So if you found, for example, that there was a trend of late material deliveries, so you might have a trend of your data showing consistent late material deliveries. So then you kind of ask the question, okay, so how come the material was being delivered late? So you're finding, for example, the material is ordered, frequently ordered too late. And then you might go, okay, why is it actually ordered too late? And you're kind of going, okay, well, look, the procurement schedule is out of date consistently. So then you're kind of going, okay, well, look, why is the procurement schedule out of date? Because procurement are not actually involved in the pull planning sessions. So once you get to that point, then you're kind of going, okay, we actually haven't got the right people earlier on in the process. So we'll make some changes to bring in the right people from that role itself. So what we're doing here is going back to the original 6 steps of the last planner. Was your continuous improvement is here. It's feeding in either the execution piece or over here. So in this example, our root cause actually belonged over here in our planning process. So we want to look to see how we can actually improve this process. So what you might find then is, in terms of moving to the action plan piece of this, you might go, okay, we've got to get Mary or John, whoever is involved in procurement, into the pull plan. So that's going to help us kind of for the next pull planning session and developing the weekly work plans as we go. And what we're really looking for is systemically, what can we do different to ensure that not only that role, but that all the relevant roles that need to be in the pull planning session are actually happening. And that's kind of the subtlety here that we're talking about. So if you have, for example, your root cause, so you're talking about here that we've identified that we actually haven't got the right people in the pull plan session. So your corrective action, which will kind of fix it in the interim, is looking at to invite procurement into the look ahead plan. So they will attend, say, the next one. So it certainly means that they will be involved. It will help out in terms of getting the material in on time and matching the schedule accordingly. But really what we're looking to do is get to the next level. So the next level, and this is really, I suppose, getting into the heart of where we'd like continuous improvement to go. You're looking at what can we do systematically for the business to be able to ensure that it not only not happens on this particular project next week, but it won't happen in a few weeks' time, a few months' time, but also that we can actually replicate it across the business for other projects as well. And that's very much the learning part of continuous improvement. So in this case, this is just 2 examples of what you could do. So you might have, for example, a checklist to ensure that the relevant people in terms of the roles are actually being invited to all parts of the process itself. And you might actually even have a very simple, you might put it up on your daily huddle board or where you've got your pull schedule set up, a very simple checklist that we've got the right roles in the room as well. So again, it's something systemically that you're leaving behind to ensure there's a preventative action there in place. So, and I suppose that's really where we're trying to get to with this whole process. You're using the metrics to understand what are the problems, what are the gaps, and then how do we not only close the gap, but prevent it from actually occurring in the future systemically within your own project and across the business itself. So ultimately what we're showing here then is very much the goal of using PPC, and actually even that whole full step is to actually continue to improve. Now I know this is kind of, I suppose, as a concept, even when I put the slide together, I'm sure people will be kind of surprised to see this in some cases. But what I would say with this is that this is very much looking at moving forward. The last planner system is, if you're using it, it's a big change in terms of how you manage your project. So this, I suppose, focus on the metrics is kind of the future. So if you're new to the last planner system, I would say build up so that you understand the different steps and then build to continuous improvement. Whereas then if you're very mature on your journey, this is kind of your next phase in terms of the challenge itself. So once we have 85% say as our benchmark, and we're trying to continuously improve, get behind those reasons for variance, or for those categories of variance, and then see, does it actually trend our PPC upwards? Are we improving our execution methods? Are we improving our planning? There's a point then where we're actually above or potentially meeting that 85%. And I suppose we've had kind of one client in particular that, very much viewed this going that actually if you hit 85%, we want you to actually push the schedule more. So what else can you do to continuously improve? That almost forces you to have a lower PPC, so that can you, reduce times, can you pull things earlier, and ultimately can you pull that schedule forward? So you're looking to try and challenge the schedule, which may actually result in actually going back down with your PPC and then continuously improving back up to the 85%. So this is kind of your long-term goal, your long-term vision in terms of using the metrics, using the data to drive continuous improvement. And I suppose very much within Lean, within the 5 Lean principles, that continuous improvement one is this pursuit of perfection. So you'll never land there, but that culturally you're trying to shift the organization to continuously improve. Okay, so that's really, I suppose, where we're trying to land with that 6th phase. And I suppose then Ballard actually talks about it is that this is kind of very much the breakthrough strategy, that if you're using continuous improvement and driving this in the business constructively and using the metrics to drive continuous improvement, that this is really where you're going to get the breakthroughs within the business itself. So that then brings us, so we've worked through, I suppose, here the different elements, and we'll touch a little bit more here in terms of the whole enterprise continuous improvement. So I suppose at the start, we kind of asked a number of questions just to kind of get you to consider that, you know, what are the last planner system metrics? You know, what do you do with the information and what does it actually tell you? So along this funnel here, I suppose the answer to the first one is very much so your lagging metric, your did I win the match or did I lose, is your PPC value. So it's telling you on a week by week basis, am I winning or am I losing? Okay. Then in itself, you can't do anything with it on its own. It's something to do with the inputs as we spoke about. So we want to see what's actually driving the PPC. And I suppose the other part I would like to, I suppose, just to stress as well around the PPC measure is that within the weekly work plan, the assignments that go into the weekly work plan are the assignments without constraints associated with them. So it's very much a measure of the plan and how we performed against the plan. There are a number of other metrics that we could look at for the other 4 areas of the planning, the scheduling piece of it. So for here, our focus for this presentation is very much looking at, we've removed the constraints. So if we've got, I don't know, say 10 assignments and 5 of them still have constraints and 5 move into the weekly work plan, the PPC is a reflection of the 5 that went into the weekly work plan. Okay, so it's not a reflection of made ready, it's very much a reflection on how we performed against the plan. So within that then, so that's your first question. So what is the measures? The first one is very much PPC. The second one then is you're going to go to the measures around the 14 categories of variance to see, okay, which ones of those will I go after, try and improve our match performance, our project performance. And then I suppose the other part of it, and again, this is very much a maturity for companies. You don't do this if you're just starting off, you don't jump straight to it, you very much build to this point. What you do with the information is the other side of it. So it can be very frustrating, you know, if you're using these systems and you're being asked to put in comments and you're being asked to put in these categories of variance, if we're not really doing anything with the information. So I would probably encourage companies to ask for the comments if you're going to do something with the data, whereas if you're not really at that point, you're probably asking people to do a task and there may be no value to it if we're not actually using the information. So again, around that, so that's very important. And in terms of the metrics, we're also dependent on the quality of the assignment. And then what you do with it, the quality of the comments are important there as well. So within that then, this is kind of as our funnel goes down. So really, I suppose all of this is the continuous improvement. That last one there then is really looking at from an enterprise perspective. So if you can, for example, focus on putting in this process of focusing in on your categories of variance and continuously improving elements of this and keep on continuously improving on one project. If you can then take that improvement and apply it to other projects, this is really kind of the maturity coming at an enterprise level. So if you're, for example, if you're building houses, what you learn on building the first housing estate, you can now take that learning and actually apply it either to the current projects that are going on, say across Ireland, for example, that you might have in your organization, or you can even look for trends. So sometimes you might have a problem, for example, if materials are late, and you may actually find it's supplier related. So you may see it in your own project. However, it's actually hitting the performance of our other projects as well as a business. So again, you're looking for those trends, not only within the project, but also across the business itself. So again, it can be really, really powerful and this is very much, again, I know I'm kind of stressing the point that this is very much at a mature level in an organization. Other sectors that are doing it, it takes them a long time to get to this point. So again, it's very much along the journey in terms of implementing the last planner system. So the key here is if you can prevent the occurrence at a project level, now you can actually go to a business level, and now you're very much looking at customer value. So again, I suppose the number one lean principle is very much around delivering value. So again, with this continuous improvement across the business, now you're actually delivering customer value to all of your clients, not just on one particular project. And I suppose I'm closing out really in terms of just the LCI research in terms of applying, I suppose, lean across the organization, that ultimately if you can bring in this philosophy of continuous improvement across the business and using the metrics, using the data and then acting on it, that over time you start to see the implications for getting ahead in terms of the schedule and also in terms of coming in under budget. So I suppose really just to recap then, it's very much looking at how metrics can be used in your business, in your projects themselves. By focusing similar to what we started with in terms of the analogy of the match, you've got the performance on the actual day or the week itself. Then you want to look at trends, you're trying to understand what it is that within the execution part can be improved and what can be improved within the planning part. So that really concludes my presentation in terms of that continuous improvement funnel, starting at your PPC, understanding your categories of variance, and then actually doing something with the information, focusing in on your preventative actions to be able to actually replicate across the organization. So I'd like to thank you for your time and attention on the presentation. I hope you found it of some value, and I'll hand over to Susan there just if you have any specific questions.
Thank you, Maria, and I'd like to thank you again for a very insightful and detailed presentation. We'll move on to the Q&A now. We have a few questions in already. Will focusing on PPC help improve quality?
Absolutely, yeah. So again, it's depending on how you actually use. First of all, I suppose it's the holistic nature of the last planner system, first of all. So with the use of the metrics, they drive, I suppose, improving communication across the project and across the different stakeholders within the project. It improves people's understandings of handoffs. So even within that alone, that can be, I suppose, a massive help in terms of, scheduling things in the sequence in such a way that we improve the quality side of it. I suppose there is, I suppose, an example just that comes to mind, I suppose, even in one example where, again, using these categories of variance, that in one example we had, say, we looked at the time estimate, and then when we got in to understand, so the example was, I suppose, is putting down a wooden floor. And we found that there was a kind of excess shims being used. So by focusing on that and actually understanding that there wasn't actually a specification for the flooring, for example, then by putting in the specification, that then now ended up in that example where there was actually no shims required. So and actually it was kind of one of those win-win situations where actually the particular contractor actually gave back 3K to the main contractor to kind of say, look, because of the improvements here, we now don't need all this shim work, we don't have to put that time in. So I suppose it was a nice example of kind of focusing in on PPC, doing your root cause analysis and actually making an improvement.
Okay, perfect. Another question here. Why would you set a PPC of 85%? Should this not be 100%?
And that, that's actually a great question. And I suppose I actually had, it's very much at the start, when I was looking at this, I couldn't get my head around why would you have, a benchmark at 85% when clearly you need the schedule to be 100% to meet the schedule. And I suppose what it is so first of all, it's not a personal target, but the logic behind it, it's very much come from Glenn Ballard himself. But the idea actually is it's what it's actually measuring. So what you're looking at is the performance of what's assigned in the week and the days also that it's assigned. So you might get all the work done in the week, which is, let's say, so it's 100% work completed on time. But what you're really trying to understand is, did everything happen on the particular day that I had planned it? So if there is any situation where you either have a kind of a late start or a late finish, or that's what you're also looking behind. So you might get everything done in the week, but what you're looking for is how do you actually improve the performance of either the execution or the planning, so that even on the particular day you've planned the activity, it actually happens on the day itself.
Okay.
Hopefully that helps answer that. So.
Yeah, good answer. Next question. As part of LPS, if a contractor confirms they are behind on an activity, will this expose them contractually and lead to problems? How should this be addressed?
Okay, so that, I suppose, first of all, that is a very good question in the sense that, but I suppose in terms of the contractual side, it would depend on what's in the contract. So depending on whether it's your fully IPD contract or if it's kind of your traditional lump sum. So a lot of this, and it's, I suppose, a good question around what actually is written into the contract in the first place. The intent of the last planner system is actually to highlight, okay, what are the reasons for delaying so that we can actually do something about it. So that is the intent of it. If behaviorally that's not what's actually happening, then it's not really using last planner. It's more using last planner to be seen to be using it rather than actually delivering what we want. So in terms of the contractual implications, it would depend on the type of contract you have. So it's probably a little bit difficult to answer the question as a black or white answer. But if that person would like to contact me directly, I'm quite happy to kind of go into a little bit more detail in it.
Okay, perfect.
If that's all right.
Yep, the question here, what are challenges to implementing continuous improvement?
So again, I suppose what I would say on this is very much, I suppose this is very much a maturity that comes with the company. So you may not want to go this full program straight away. I suppose one of the challenges, I suppose, first of all, is it a challenge or is it a way maybe to consider when you're going to bring it in, is that, I would like that you consider, first of all, that the leadership of the organization actually get it, and that they understand really the benefits of using it. So the leadership can be your own company, or even your client company, that there's a shared understanding of what the intent of this is. If you measure PPC, so I suppose we've seen an example where, if you don't get over 85% PPC, it can actually have a hit, as that person mentioned, on the contract. So that's driving all the wrong behaviours, because now you're going to do everything in your power to make sure that you've got the 85%. So you'll either, make sure your target is a little bit soft, for example, so that you're not going to be compliant. So I think that real understanding of what the real intent of the last planner system can be a challenge to overcome, and it's something definitely to prioritise. I think the second part of it is just the time. I mean, people are so busy on projects and schedules, all the expectations are going up. So I think kind of almost it gives you back time in the long run. So it's very much a long-term kind of thinking, which can be challenging when you've got a pressure today to get a job done for next week. So it's to be able to, I suppose, hold this philosophy in mind that this is exactly how we do work, is important as well. I know, I suppose, a third challenge I've actually just been talking to even a client yesterday. If you're not the main contractor as well, it can be quite challenging to implement this. So you could have your own perfect plan, but if you're finding that, for example, either your GC or the client is making changes within the week, it's very hard to have a good PPC if there's that level of volatility happening within the week itself. So again, it's using the data, sometimes people will go back and have those conversations, but as much as you can in that scenario, it's very much maybe bringing your Pareto and actually using the data, because you can't hide from the data. It's very black and white. So again, maybe not just having a weekly report, actually having the data up in lights, but it can definitely be a challenge.
Okay. Another couple of questions here for you. Does a PPC in a shorter timeline work more effectively as compared to a longer timeline, or is there any ideal timeline to monitor PPC?
So I suppose on that, so sometimes it depends on the project. So I know, for example, like some fit out projects may be over in 3 weeks versus maybe a data center or pharma, you're talking about maybe years. So I suppose that's one part of it. So it would depend, first of all, on the type of project and the size of the project as well. If it's a small project, you could be done quicker. So if it's something like that, certainly I would probably recommend using PPC both in the short term, which is, are there almost like, quick 5 whys that you can do. So last week we had whatever the problem was. Can we do something for next week that will help us improve and maybe get back on schedule? So there's the short-term piece of it. There tend to be more the just do it type actions, and I'd highly recommend, particularly if you're starting on this journey, it's good to be able to see you responded to it, you got an improvement the following week. With trending, so I suppose from a longer term perspective, ideally you'd like to be seeing maybe a trend over maybe 12 weeks. I think would be kind of a good reflection on, was the change, because sometimes the change might take even a few weeks to implement, so you might need much more data. So in terms of the trending for larger projects, I would say a window of about 3 months would also be of value.
Okay, perfect. This is kind of a longish question, so bear with me.
Sorry, Susan, I cut you off.
No problem. Is there a platform in existence that helps construction supervisors view the target completion times or measurable daily outputs agreed at the most recent last planner session, and then on the same application record actual progress against the target, and if negative, why, and what is the catch-up plan?
So just on that, is that kind of how to present the data? I'm just in terms of the context of the question.
Yeah, it seems to be measuring. Yes, it seems to be managing the data. Yeah.
So again, I suppose without necessarily knowing the details, so again, if that person would like to contact me directly, that's no problem at all. I suppose in terms of some of the thoughts that would come to mind, so I know it's a little bit more challenging as well with COVID at the moment. So if it's, for example, a smaller type project, you may put something very simple, trends up. So for example, building your PPC, on a chart, building your cash real variance. So you can keep it as simple as that if it's a small project, and something as simple electronically as Excel will help you out on that. If you'd like to go down a more software route, again, you can build out an Excel type platform, and that will show you your targets versus your actuals. I know ourselves, we just have there's a program called CoPlan that will help at a weekly work plan level, that you can see what's your target and then how you're progressing throughout the week. And again, you're capturing at the same time, you can actually update in real time to put in, you say, your category, your variance, and even your comment. So you can do that, I suppose, real time in a virtual situation, which is probably more suitable for kind of like a medium to large project rather than maybe just a smaller project itself. But I think it would definitely give you that visual that you're talking about, that you can see that trend over time within the week, and then the comments and the categories of variance at the same time.
Okay, and just another comment on that question. The person's asking, what is the tool? Is it CoPlanner?
CoPlan, yeah. So if they'd like to contact me directly, it's just a tool that we have. It's a software package called CoPlan.
Okay, perfect. Somebody else just asking, is PPC the only metric used
within the last planner system?
Yes, so it seems to be.
So on that, I suppose I very much focused just this presentation around the performance of the weekly work plan. I think what another measure, I suppose, and there's a number of measures that we would use as well. One is very much looking at even before the weekly work plan. The objective very much of those planning phases is to actually make work ready. So we have a number of measures that we use around making work ready. One is just as simple as literally, as we work through the 6-week look ahead for that weekly work plan that we're looking at in 6 weeks time. If originally we planned in a 6 weeks time to have, let's just say 20 assignments, and by the time we've actually got to the week before the weekly work plan, if only 10 can go in, then there's another measure that measures the planning cycle. So what we'd like to do then is get behind, okay, that's only a 50% make ready. what is it in the process that we weren't able to, essentially how come we didn't remove the constraints for the other 5? And again, there's a whole learning, exactly the same learning that we would apply here. So we're trying to understand why actually wasn't the work ready on time for the weekly work plan. So the PPC, so that's a very good question. The PPC is very much looking forward in terms of assuming that everything can go ahead. There's no constraints, there's no reasons not to do the work, but there are measures. So one, for example, would be percent made ready, which is essentially a measure of number of tasks planned 6 weeks in advance against how many actually made it into the weekly work plan. So that would be one that we would start looking to understand. Was it, so for example, if all the constraints are coming in 2 days before the weekly work plan, then the process is not working. We're looking to try and raise constraints throughout that 6 week. So if everything is only the week before, we're not really using the process as we had intended.
Okay, perfect. One more question: is there a KPI for quality?
In terms of the last planner itself, so I suppose the last planner itself wouldn't necessarily have a specific quality measure. So you could use, say, so like what some companies would use is kind of in complementing it, looking at the snags, for example, a client walk down. So last planner itself doesn't call out explicitly quality metrics. You'd use your other, say, part of your quality management system measures. So in particular, the snags, I suppose, would be the main one that you'd be looking at. So again, if you'd like to complement it as part of your process when you're working through it, again, you might actually have that information. So sometimes we'd have, particularly when we were on site, you'd actually have the boards. So you'd have your last planner system metrics, you'd have your safety metrics with it, and your quality metrics, because you should see a correlation between the two. If we're planning well, we're making sure that we're planning safely. So again, there shouldn't be overcrowding in the areas that people are working in, for example. So you'd like to see, so typically we'd recommend you'd have your last planner system metrics available, you have your quality metrics, and you have your safety metrics. So you're kind of seeing that full picture. And there's something amiss if you've got a really good PPC all the time, but your quality metrics are still poor, or your safety metrics. There's a disjoint somewhere. And again, that would need some sort of continuous improvement activity to understand, why are we not seeing that correlation? Because there should be a direct correlation.
Okay, that's perfect. Maria, thanks a million. I'd like to thank Maria again for her presentation. A copy of the webinar will be sent out to everyone who attended. We will send out the information shortly via LinkedIn, Twitter and newsletter for the next webinar. That will take place on the 22nd of July. The topic of July's webinar is BIM implementation, and it will be presented by Victor Rogue-Segura from Biometric. Thank you again from Maria and myself on behalf of Lean Construction Ireland. You can follow Lean Construction Ireland on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and through the website leanconstructionireland.ie. Thanks again, Maria. Enjoy the rest of your day and stay safe.
No problem. Thanks very much. Thank you.